Hello there, my name is Kai, and I am a bit of a rambler. I like to travel, learn, and tell stories. And one of the things I didn't learn very well for a long time is not to drink so much that you put yourself in dangerous situations. So, this series of episodes are going to be called I Got Myself Into This, because none of these unfortunate events happened to me as entirely the fault of some outside actor. And in fact, almost all of them are entirely my fault, and something I did or chose to do, like drinking beers and then doing something dumb that resulted in consequences that I did eventually learn from. And this is not a recommendation of how you should travel or anything like that. This is just saying that even though I did a whole bunch of dumb things, my travel experience has been great overall. And really, these are just entertaining stories so that you can listen to someone who lives a little more recklessly than you and doesn't recommend it for most people because it's a crazy thing to do a lot of the time. So with that in mind, just have fun with these. These are things that are my fault, that I thought it would be fun to share, and that some of you might find funny. I do. Like, talking about these again, I still find a lot of them funny. Remembering them now does make me laugh. So I'd like to share some dangerous things I happened across and some stupid things I did. I want to start with the most fun consequence of drinking, that was still very dangerous, but it's definitely the strangest event that turned out okay. So when I travel, I talked about walking before. I like to travel at a pace. I don't like to rush around or run at some hectic speed to get where I'm going. When we went to eat Xiao Kao, Bill and I would usually ride bicycles. It was a good way to discover new spots, and it was a good way to exercise some because we knew we were going to be drinking a bunch of beer and eating way too much food. So bicycling was kind of a way to offset all the calories we were taking in. Plus, we both liked bicycling. But when we cycled, Bill always pumped real hard on the pedals, and he was always getting somewhere, which is how most people bicycle, those leg pumpers. I am much more like if you pictured a late 70s Italian movie, just sort of gently pedaling along, like looking around at the sun and the sky around me and just like, look at this world whipping by me. So frequently I would have to pedal to keep up with Bill while he was shooting his way home after another barbecue or hot pot or something. And after a rousing bout of beer and barbecue one night, I was real drunk, real happy and contented, and decided to let him shoot off like an arrow and I would just enjoy my leisurely ride home. But after I was riding for like 40 minutes by myself and he had continued to the town we lived in, I looked around and realized I had no idea where I was. And this wasn't a huge concern because I knew I was in the general area. I was heading west out of the city. And like I said, Beijing was so much less developed even a decade ago than it is now, that there weren't many roads leading out in the general direction I was going. So I was going in the right direction, and I knew the name of the town, and I had asked people before, where is this town? And they pointed me, and eventually I got back to my town. This all happened like a couple months, maybe 3 months tops after I got to Beijing. I don't even think it was 3 months. So I just wasn't familiar with the area, but I knew generally where I was heading. But I had also just had a giant dinner with, we'll say, 20 beers. Chinese beers are 2% generally. So I was pretty tired. And I decided that I could lay down, because most of it was just empty fields all around me, take a nap, and then continue on my ride in a couple hours. And if I just kept going down the road and started asking people, where is my town, Baijiatuan, someone would be able to tell me where to go and like which road. Oh, you just went on whatever. You took a right instead of a left. Plus, I wouldn't be as sleepy drunk, so I would understand any directions they gave me better. So that was my plan. I was going to find a comfy spot to just lie under the stars. I was already fairly outside of the Outer Ring Road, as far as I could judge. So it wasn't very busy. There weren't a lot of cars or anything. And then I would just take a nap, wake up, and continue my journey from there. The next thing I know, my eyes snap open, and I'm looking up at the lightening sky, the morning sky. And it's not just getting brighter. It's definitely the sun is up, maybe 7 a.m., so it's several hours later. I didn't rest my eyes. I fell asleep. And there were a lot of cars, like morning rush hour cars going on as everybody got to work. But I was confused because I was already outside of the city, so I don't know why the cars were so loud around me if I had slept off the side of the road. So then I looked to my left, and then I froze. And I looked to my right really slowly, and I froze. Because I wasn't sleeping in the middle of a traffic lane, which is maybe what that sounds like. But what happened, I did decide to sleep on the railing of an overpass over the last Outer Ring Highway. So like I said, I had passed outside of that, but I must have decided that the railing was wide enough that it looked like a comfy spot to lay down. So my spine and head and both legs were kicked up on the railing of an overpass above the highway. And when I woke up, I was just lying supine reclined on this railing, on a railing. And when I looked left, I saw rush hour traffic zooming underneath me, hundreds of cars every minute, just, roaring down the highway. So I slowly took my one crossed foot over the other one and then leaned to my right until I jumped down onto the sidewalk of the overpass bridge that I was sleeping on, that I had been sleeping on the railing of. My bicycle was next to me on its kickstand on the sidewalk, unlocked. They have giant sidewalks, so it wasn't taking up half the sidewalk, but, it was a bicycle on the sidewalk. Just parked haphazardly on its kickstand. My backpack with its laptop inside was wide open, so I don't know, I must have gotten something out of my backpack, and then I just left that on the sidewalk. And I wasn't alone on this bridge. Like, a bunch of people were walking down the sidewalk back and forth, but they all just must have seen the crazy Lawai sleeping on the railing of an overpass and been like, yeah, sometimes foreigners sleep on overpass railings. They're just weird like that. And none of them took my laptop, which is shocking because China is the only place I ever had things taken if you leave them alone for a second. But that did not happen here. I'm thinking it was because I was farther out of the city. Because in my little town, everyone's real laid back, very respectful, in a different way than one from the USA might recognize. But I found the people living outside of the city generally safer and more respectful of personal belongings. And one of those data points is my open backpack on the sidewalk that I was asleep next to with my unlocked bike, and none of my belongings were absconded with. And while that's kind of remarkable to me, the amazing thing is that I managed to sleep on the railing of a bridge for a good 5 hours straight without tipping over either onto the bridge or down into the underpass with rush hour traffic. And that no one tapped my shoulder to check if I was okay and jolted me awake so that I got surprised. They just kept walking on past. That's the image from this story I like to remember the most, or I like to think about, just serenely snoring away on the railing of this bridge, and everybody in the city just going about their day, walking into the city over this overpass. And so I picked up my backpack, got on my bike, kept going down the road, recognized a few things. I was on the right way home and I got back home eventually. But I never slept on an overpass again, and I believe I actually considered it some other drunk night after a barbecue. I saw like a particularly wide railing, and I was like, that must be what I thought that other time I slept on a railing, because it does look pretty wide and comfortable for a bridge railing. But luckily I didn't take that risk more than one time. Since I'm talking about stupid things I did after I drank, though, I might as well talk about... Oh god, I just thought of another one. Okay, you know what? This is the first stupid drunk thing I ever did while traveling outside of China. Like, seriously dumb. And let's just get right into it. So, I was on my first trip outside of China after I decided to permanently leave, which I was going to leave in October, it turned out. And Oktoberfest would be starting in Munich. And I thought, yeah, sure, let's just go to Munich. And you can say you've been to Oktoberfest, which the food there was fine. The music there was loud. I don't know. It was fine. I liked the quiet beer tents outside of the main Oktoberfest park, and I loved my little campground that I was in. But maybe I don't understand enough, or I didn't understand enough about German culture at the time, especially to really get into the swing of the celebration. The thing was, I didn't really need to. I loved being in Munich, in Germany. It was a new country after I had been in China for a few years. I was excited to find out all these new things. The city itself is gorgeous, the architecture, the parks. I was speaking German. It was a fun time, regardless of where I was, and I just wanted to experience Oktoberfest and just see what it was like in real life. And I did. Now, the stupid thing occurred back at my little camp that I mentioned I loved. There was a small town, maybe a 20-minute walk away from this big outdoor field encampment where all of us Oktoberfest poor travelers were staying at the time, and I just had a little tent there. I still hadn't gotten rid of my tent yet. So I would walk through the town every morning and day, and that was more fun than Oktoberfest for me. There was bakeries and delis, and once I discovered this hardware store, I was really excited, not because of the hardware, but because they had like a homemade treats section, and one of them was blackberry wine and elderberry wine. So instead of buying a $10 beer from Oktoberfest and then walking around the extremely crowded fairground and looking at stuff, I could buy a $10 jug of this blackberry wine and enjoy that on a leisurely stroll around or in the comfort of my tent, which was set up like a cozy little camper nest. Oh, and there was a food bar there, so you could get French fries and small snacks, and I got a bunch of like cured deli meats and cheeses and enjoyed blackberry wine at the dining area they had there. So that was a pretty good time. It lulled me into this sense of security, and I even saw travelers around me being kind to other travelers and sharing food and drink, and I got into it. We all shared stuff. I actually met the magician kid from that meme where there's a bunch of kids walking in a line getting a certificate, and then one of them snaps out a magic wand and looks at the camera directly. Like, yeah, I'm wearing a cloak, this is a wand, I'm a wizard. And then keeps walking on. I met that kid when he was like 15 years older, because that was a Vine or something, I can't remember. And he did magic tricks for us there, and he showed us the meme and then looked at him, and we were like, yeah, that pretty much looks like him. Maybe it wasn't, but it definitely looked like the guy. And that would kind of be a weird, really specific claim if that wasn't actually him. But he became a magician and still was into it and did a bunch of coin tricks for us when we were all sharing wine and eating French fries and chicken wings or whatever. So it was a very communal experience, and it was my first camping traveling experience on the road. I had traveled to China and lived there for years, but I was still living in an apartment there. I was still living in a city. I was still going to a job. And here in Munich, I was free completely for the first time from any responsibilities. I had money to travel for an indefinite amount of time. I just had a backpack on my back. I did have the tent still, but that was just about it. So being in this big traveler, much more hippie-seeming community, I felt pretty comfortable around everyone in there. And I was perpetually unsober, not wasted all the time, but always floating on a bit of a buzz. I wasn't thinking as carefully as I might otherwise have. So there were great showers at this facility also, this campground that I was paying to camp in. So I went inside and I was going to take a shower, and most of my stuff I left back in my tent. So all I had on me were my jeans and shirt, but I didn't want my jeans to get wet because they took a long time to dry. So I left my jeans hanging on the outside of the shower door stall, where there was a hook for them to hang. But some of you might be thinking, shouldn't you take your pants with your presumably wallet inside the stall? You should. I didn't. Halfway through the shower, I heard a weird noise and opened the door, and no one was in the room, so I thought I was hearing things. But that was the sound of someone going through my jeans and rattling the door, probably from pulling on the jeans, pulling on the hook connected to the door, and then running away with my wallet, which was already a problem because I did have all of the money I took out of the ATM a couple days ago in there, but was actually a bigger problem because right before I took the shower, I had received a priority mail package from my parents in the United States because it had my birth certificate and my social security card in it. And I had just put them in my wallet 45 minutes before, but I figured I would take a shower first before I secured them inside my rucksack, inside my tent. Should have done that. Didn't do that. Got my wallet stolen, so I lost my driver's license, my social security card, my birth certificate. My passport was in my other pocket, and they went for the wallet, of course. So I did still have my passport. And after I figured out what happened and realized how dumb and trusting I had been, for no reason, there's no reason you should have been that dumb or trusting, but I was just going with the flow at that point. And I do still tend to let the flow direct me, but I do make sure that important documents and my wallet are secured and within visible sight, and I don't leave them in a public area anymore. Because knowledge is power. And I checked back every day for the following 2 weeks I was there to see if they at least returned the wallet with the important documents and license, even if they just took the cash, but they didn't. I don't know what happened to any of that. I reported those documents having been stolen. The US government basically enters you into an Excel spreadsheet, puts a little dot next to your name so that if your identity is caught doing anything weird, they can be like, okay, it's probably that guy who got his identity stolen. I got lucky, nothing ever happened to me. They probably just took the cash and then threw the wallet away in the bottom of Oktoberfest trash, and that's lying in a Munich dump somewhere 30 feet underground. So that was just me being naive and believing in the power of traveling, which is an extremely powerful guiding force. But yeah, don't leave valuables in a public place. And then lock yourself on the other side of a door away from your valuables. Yeah, it's not that other travelers aren't kind and gracious, or that campgrounds aren't safe and relatively secure. They are. This is more like I decided to go scuba diving and then left my tank at home and wanted to see what would happen if I breathed seawater. Oh boy. I met this girl later that evening who showed me she had a card and a Bluetooth little fob. So like if her card in her wallet got taken too far away from the fob in her other pocket, then it started beeping and she would know it was separated from her. And I was like, you won't believe what I just did. And then for like 10 minutes, she just explained to me how I was stupid. And didn't I realize how dumb that was? And what was wrong with me that I didn't realize that? How dumb was I? Anyway, that's how I learned to pay a minimum of attention to the belongings I have. And I have never, knock on wood, lost anything since. That is not true. I have never lost a critical document again. This one time I was bicycling in Beijing and I hit a bump on a downhill slope, and a bag I had attached to my, like a saddlebag, and I checked it before I went down this hill. And then I went down the hill, and when I looked down, the saddlebag was gone. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just rode back up to the hill, like a 1-minute ride, and it was gone. And the streets were empty. Nothing was there. There were a few people, but someone must have saw it, grabbed it, ran away in the 2 minutes, we'll say, that it took for me to get back up the hill to where it must have fallen off, because I checked it right before I went down the hill. I did lose my laptop and something else, but I had my phone and my wallet in my pockets and my passport. So I still had everything I needed. I still made my flight. It was just a very bizarre experience. That was the only other thing I've ever... Nope, no, that's not true either. I actually got drunk at a barbecue and left my laptop in a backpack on the table and then calmly rode away on a bicycle. And when I went back a few minutes later, and then when I went back for it, it was gone. So laptops are like not expensive in China. So it sounds like they're not cheap, they're $100 or whatever. But I had so much free money to spend that losing a laptop did not hurt me at all. It was just another dumb symptom of being drunk and having too much money for the first time and being younger and just not paying attention to the things I should have paid attention to. And even losing all of my documents was only dangerous in an obscure, roundabout way. I wasn't in any immediate, direct, or physical danger because I lost my documents. And there are plenty of services around for tourists who meet unfortunate situations, or in my case, get themselves into unfortunate situations. In contrast, the next story is more dangerous, but again, was entirely of my own doing, which was while I was in Thailand, and it was certainly not dangerous because any of the people there. I was walking between cities, and I did that. I had already been walking through a few cities in other countries, and it was fun. And so I was doing it through Thailand too. I just liked following an offline map I had, Maps.me, and I would just look around and see what road looked okay, or what road went over a mountain that would have a good view. And that's how I was doing. I was just going along and following the offline maps and discovering places as I went along. And I saw this one really thin road that would go through some interesting looking terrain. And so I took that and I followed it for 25 minutes, but it started looking very like residential and there was nothing else around. But I just kept walking along the road because there was only one road. And then I heard a dog shout, and this enormous pit bull leapt from a line of bushes. And I mean, he wasn't huge, but pit bulls are real dangerous and scary, no matter how big they are, because they don't get super small either. And he was just barking at me. And someone came out of a house after a while. I was walking backwards slowly, and the dog was just following me, barking super aggressively. And the teenager who came out of his house tried to speak to me in Thai, but I could only say, like, me go there, sorry, here city, like, really bad Thai. And so his mom came out, who could speak super good English, surprisingly, because we were in the middle of nowhere. And she explained to me that this road wasn't a throughway into the city anymore. They built a home, so the road ends now at their home at the end of this thin road that I had been walking on. So this whole 5-minute time they're talking to me, the pit bull is just like, I'm gonna eat your legs. I'm gonna eat all of your legs off, shouting, barking at me. And the mom asked the teenager to take the dog back, but they had two pit bulls, so the other one came out to join when he started taking the first one back. And I just started walking away back toward the road to go back to the main road I was originally on. And I have two pit bulls running around me and screaming, barking, and I picked up a stick. I didn't wave it toward them or anything, except in Thailand, I have a dog whacking stick very often because for some reason Thailand dogs in particular are aggressive among countries. I have to have a dog aggression episode and try and put this together, because some countries' dogs are super aggressive and some countries' dogs are very chill. And I haven't found a correlation. It doesn't matter how much food they have. Yeah, I have to figure that out. So these two pit bulls are scream barking at me. The teenager's like, "Stop it, you guys," but he's clearly not very worried about them attacking. The property was big, so I still had 100 yards to walk back to the gate. So I could leave their property, and the pit bulls were getting closer with every bark, and they kept snapping, and then the first one, the white one, was biting at my leg. If I hadn't moved my legs, he would have bit my legs. So I did have to start hitting him away, with the stick, because he was biting at my legs, and then he ran away 10 feet, ran forward 5, and took a flying leap at me, the first white pit bull. To which I took a step back to get out of his trajectory and used the branch I had picked up like a baseball bat and swung it and cracked the dog right across the ribs. But since pit bulls are one solid muscle made of steel, the branch broke in half across his body, and he landed and just kept barking and biting at me. He did back away a little, but did not stop shout barking and going after bites. I deterred them both with the half a branch left over, but he didn't take any more flying leaps at me, which is good. It was he was as high as my face. It was crazy. And we get almost to the front gate, and then the original one, the first one who saw me, that same slightly bigger one that took a leap at my face, I started to say, "Okay, thank you," and I turned away, and as soon as I turned my back, that first pit bull leapt at me, and I saw that happening in the corner of my eye, so I turned fully so that my backpack was between me and him, and I felt this impact, and I looked back, and the pit bull was attached by his jaw to my rucksack, like an eel, like a canine eel, just latched on there and not moving. And I shook the rucksack with my shoulders, but his giant bowling ball head just stayed gripped on there and his body shook. And he stayed clamped onto the rucksack for I don't know, it must have been 30 seconds at least, which is, a few seconds? Doesn't seem like a long time, but it's a long time if it's a pit bull clamped onto you a foot away from your flesh. So it was pretty crazy. And that rucksack still didn't tear. It's the same rucksack I'm using today, 15 years later. It is crazy how durable that rucksack is. The only thing that has ever broken on that rucksack is when the pit bull did it, one of his tooths bit into a piece of webbing, like a pocket of webbing on the outside, and there's one piece of frayed webbing. And none of the other webbing has frayed since that attack, 10, 12 years ago. But that's the only part of the rucksack that doesn't look new. It's a remarkable piece of equipment. So anyway, this pit bull wasn't letting go, and he's hanging off the back of my rucksack, and the Thai kid is yelling at him, and the Thai mom is yelling at the pit bull, but the pit bull, of course, is a pit bull, so he doesn't care what's happening. He just wants to murder something. The teenager was hitting the dog with sticks to try and get it to detach, but like I said, pit bulls are one giant muscle, and he didn't care at all. I just kept walking, and I just walked with a pit bull attached by jaw to the back of my rucksack for the remaining 10 feet or 20 feet to the gate, whatever it was. And the entire 200, 300 foot walk back to the gate of the private property that we had been walking toward this whole time. The second black pit bull was still scream barking at me the whole time and jumping around aggressively, while now this first one was latched onto the back of my rucksack. And when I got to the threshold of the gate that was their property, the pit bull attached to my rucksack finally dropped off and bolted back, and the black one followed him, and the two of them ran into this line of trees back in the yard closer to the house. But in a second, they were so fast and crazy. He dropped off and ran back inside. But that was a visceral shock when he leaped at me and I managed to put my rucksack between me and him, and then he latched onto my rucksack. And I don't know if you've ever seen pit bulls rip things apart or creatures apart, but they are aggressive. So I just got to shout out Decathlon for that rucksack again. That thing saved my butt. And to be clear, I got myself into that. It was a very thin road. It wasn't on the map. There was a sign in Thai that I couldn't translate at the time. And it very much looked like private property, but the road continued on through it. And there was a house I could see, so there were plenty of reasons I should not have been taking that road and I should not have entered that property. So I just want to be clear that this is not something you're going to encounter at all in cities or towns around Thailand. This was tens of miles out, 3 days into walking between cities, in the middle of nowhere, on private property. The family was still super nice, they just had a couple crazy pit bulls as pets. And rural dogs in Thailand are aggressive. Gotta do a dogs episode. I haven't pulled the threads together yet, though, so I don't know why some countries have aggressive dogs and some countries have totally laid-back dogs. Sticking with Thailand, since we're already mentally there, another dumb thing I did, while maybe on that same trip, it might have been, was choosing to walk under the blazing sun when I knew there was no shade. So I had a bottle of water, but I had to get miles, like 10 miles or something, across an uncharacteristically dry and deserted stretch of road. And the sun hadn't quite risen yet when I strolled into the town that I was going to start the next stretch of my journey from. So there was a small morning market like there usually is in towns in Thailand, and I picked up some fruit, I think, just not a lot of food, but I saw that one of the ladies had fried crickets, which taste great. They're just like small crickets, maybe an inch or inch and a half long, and they fry them up, so they just get super crunchy, the outer shells, and there's no like squishy parts inside, and then they pour some salted spice mix on top. So it just tastes like popcorn. When I tried them the first time, I was like, oh, this is great. So I just got a bag of those to snack on while I walked to the next town. And I had made a 10-mile walk pretty easily. I'm just going to say 10 miles. I can't remember the exact, but it was pretty far. So I was pretty confident that I'd just need this little snack between the two towns I was walking. But I was sort of on a hill, so I could see the road going off into the distance. And like I said, the sun was rising, so it was bluish sky. Like, it was still very comfortable weather, and the temperature was okay, as in not murderously hot, which Thailand can get, for my sensibilities, very quickly and very often. But I could see the road itself that I was going to be walking for a long time, which is very rare in Thailand. Everywhere is a jungle, so I don't know what this stretch of road was up to, but there weren't many trees. There were a few like huts you can stay in and hide under so that the sun doesn't murder you if you get caught out in the sun, or handmade bamboo rest pavilions rather than a hut. But I looked at the map and I did the time and I thought about the sun coming up and I thought it would be okay. So I started walking down that road, crunched a couple crickets, and just kept strolling on down. And the sun came up, and it got a little warm. And then the sun came up more, and I was like, how far am I? And then the sun came up more, and it was hot. And then it was 9 a.m., and it was real hot. And then it was 10, it was real hot. And I still hadn't made it within sight of the other town. So I was maybe halfway at this point, and I was putting up with the heat, but I have a rucksack on my back, and I don't know if I had my sun sleeves at this point. So I was getting burned, and I eventually just ducked into one of these huts that they have every kilometer or so. And it's not like a air-conditioned room or anything like that. It is a bunch of bamboo poles, no walls, with a bamboo pole roof on top, unthatched. And I just had to hide from the sun because I had nothing to do, and it's 9:30 a.m., 10:30 a.m. maybe. It's still the morning, and it's so hot, and I've run out of water already, and there's nowhere that I have been able to refill it, which is extremely uncommon in Thailand. Every place I've walked between before had some kind of convenience store or some kind of tiny town or even just a neighborhood. And Thai people have reached out to me many times from their houses, from the neighborhoods, just offering me water or even a shower or something as a traveler. But there was nothing on this deserted stretch of road, right? The only place without a jungle. So I guess that makes sense why nobody was living there. But it was so curious. That's why I wanted to keep walking it. But yeah, I discovered that there really was nothing there. I think I did have like a couple gulps of water that I was rationing out. And with this heat and how much longer I had the sun to go, I had to wait 7 hours now for the sun to go down. I decided to just hide in one of these sun huts and try to wait out the rest of the day. And no one came down that road. And all I had was a bag of crickets, which I ate a couple and then realized that warm, oily bugs were not going to cut it in this climate and in the state my body was in. So I started getting nauseous, not right away, but maybe around 1 p.m. or something. The bugs were really crawling around in my guts. And luckily I didn't get physically sick, but I stopped eating the bugs. So I curled up on the bamboo platform off the ground and just waited for the day to pass. But when I got to around 4 and I was out of water, plenty of bugs left, I decided to just walk, and maybe that was heat stroke brain, because I really burned my arm, and I remember languidly thinking, oh, look at my arm, it's just getting tan finally. And I don't tan, I burn, I'm one of those. But I made it to the next town. It wasn't too far, it was a couple miles more. And it was nighttime, so the night market was out, and I got mangoes and coconut water and drinks and all this kind of good stuff, and I was fine. But it felt really dangerous under the bamboo roof, frying under the sun, knowing that my water was slowly running out with each sip I took. And I've never encountered any kind of desert area in Thailand again, so this was just a weird small patch devoid of trees that I could hide in, and I had committed myself to walking several miles into it, and I couldn't walk back to the town because I was, in the middle of this weird deserted area that luckily had that shack, or my goose would have been cooked. So those are just a few things. I'm always curious in the road less traveled, and that ends me up in some crazy situations sometimes, or dangerous situations, but all of these, as you can plainly hear, are clearly avoidable things that I did not have to do. And usually I assessed beforehand and thought, this could be dangerous, and then I just walked blithely into that danger. So for the typical travel experience, there's no risk of you running into these things. If you see a blinding desert, don't walk miles into it before the sun rises and commit yourself to that terrain. Don't wander without any preparation in the backwoods of Thailand. Don't trespass on private property, posted private property, and you won't encounter crazy animals. There's so many nice towns and everywhere that you can stay indefinitely. There's no reason to backpack. I just like kind of exploring and doing these crazy things. But your travel experience in Thailand or any other country, Italy or whatever, can be as tame or adventurous as you like. These are just stories that I kind of like to look back on and reminisce about, so I wanted to share a few of them. You can talk to me, bitofarambler@gmail.com, or all the socials. And if I hear from you, I'll probably get back to you on the Saturday Ramble On episodes. And there are plenty of other situations that I got myself into, and more of those will be coming up in future episodes. Bye.